Hi, I'm Shaken Gaming. In this video I'm going to first of all apologize for my last video. I simply forgot to include passives in this guide. The top 10 list of single target and AoE damage abilities that does the most damage in Dragon Champions. To specify what's included and what isn't, every character is considered a solo character because I don't know who's on the enemy team and who's on the ally team, so that's why I'm not including allies in this calculation of the most damaging abilities. Second, every character is considered level 80, gear 11, and maxed all abilities, including the passives. But no leader abilities are included as well, because I don't know who's going to lead. Lastly, no runes, because runes can change it for every character. If you want more damage on a character, you can put better damage runes in. So that's why I'm not calculating that either. So, a top 10 list of the single target abilities that does the most damage, and a top 10 list of the AoE abilities that does the most damage. AoE abilities are calculated as hitting 5 targets, if they are able to hit 5 targets, that is. So I think that covers everything. Let's head on to the list. First, the single target characters. We've got Puncherface. He's just a teaser pick. He's number 11. He's not really in the top list, but he's close with just over 15,500 damage on his second ability. But let's move on to the list. I have a surprise on number 10. It's a healer. Aliria's third ability does 350 damage, which is a lot, and she has a high base damage, which brings her up to 15.7k damage in a single hit. At number 9 we have Imgur. Her second ability does 400% magic damage to an enemy, which in total does 16.3k damage. At number 8 we have Revolve. His third ability does 400% damage. And here comes the extra parts. Well, let's take Revolve finished first. He does 16.9k damage with this ability if there are no bleeds. Because in this calculation I'm not considering poison, bleeding, or burning either, sorry. Blackout there. Which in general will increase Revolve's damage, because every time an enemy got a bleed on them, he will do 20% more damage to them, but that's not included in this calculation. Also, damage from bleeds and poisoned and burning are not calculated because they are depending on how much health the enemy hit has, and I don't know that either. So that will bring him up higher. Just to clarify for those that don't know, bleeding, poison and burning all do 5% of the target's hit, 5% of the target's health on each tick every round, except on raid bosses, there it's 0.5. On to the next character, that is number 7, and it is one that nobody builds. It's Old Lur. His second ability hits 3 times for 140% each, and this brings him up to 16.9k damage in this single hit. We have another less used character on number 6. It's Wanderlula. Her second ability does 300% physical damage to an enemy, and that does 17k damage to one target. On to number 5, that is General Murdoch. His second ability, 400% physical damage to an enemy, plus various other debuffs and turn meter reduction, but I'm not calculating the best skill, just the most damaging skill. So this brings him up to 17.7k damage on the 5th place. Next one is Eric Shieldbreaker at rank 4. His second ability does 390% physical damage and 30% more damage against shields. I have not calculated the extra 30%, so potentially he will do even more damage, but that's again depending on the enemy, if they have a shield or not. Eric Shieldbreaker does 17.9k damage with this ability. And for the top 3, we have Nightail at the 3rd place. With her second ability, does 420% magical damage, plus ability block for 2 turns. And she does 18.1k damage with this ability. At 2nd place, and this is where my last video failed badly, is Sharp, because I didn't calculate in his passive in the last video, and that gives him 30% extra crit chance. So in average, not in crits, all of these calculations are in average, but still calculating in the crits. Each hit does 150% damage, and with the crits averaged out, he does around 18.3k damage on this ability if all 3 attacks hit. On 1st place, we have Shadar with his second ability, a whooping 460% magic damage to an enemy plus stuns. This is an awesome ability, and it does 18.4k damage to one enemy. That more or less concludes the video. No, not the video, but the single targets, except there's an unreleased character who has 1st place. Her second ability does 440% damage to an enemy, plus some debuffs, and it does 24k damage, which is 6k more than Shadar on 2nd. So that's a big jump up. She's not released yet, she might be nerfed, but she's definitely awesome. On the AoE list, as I said, 5 targets considered hit. This guy is the honorable mention at number 11, so actually not part of the list. But moving on to number 10 on the most damaging AoE ability, we have Snorri. His second ability does 220% physical damage to all enemies and inflicts bleeding, which is not considered here, so his actual damage in most fights will be higher. Also, in most fights he will have his Berserk Stance up, which gives him an increased critical hit chance, but that is not considered here either, because all the calculations are done without extra abilities activated. So without that, he does 64.1k damage and puts him at number 10. At number 9, we have his buddy, Freezard. Freezard does 220% magical damage, also reduces turn meter, but again this is a highest damage calculation, not a best skill calculation, so that's not considered. But with Blizzard he does 49k damage in average. On to number 8 on the list, that is Major Shot. His second ability does 49.3% 49.3k damage from scaling his base damage by 230% to all enemies. And on to number 7, if I can calculate here. That's Slinger. Another character that potentially will do more damage because his passive gives him various buffs, but that is after his first turn and it can be dispelled and so on, so it's not calculated here, but he can go higher than this on the list. 250% damage, which in total gives him 49.4k damage. And next one is Revol on 6th place. He does 50.6k damage with his AoE ability. That does 240% physical damage to all enemies. And just as on the single target, he will usually be teamed up with other characters that do bleed damage, and therefore his total damage in battles will most times be even higher than this. So he's 6 here, but he might go higher in actual use in fights. Number 5, getting to the high numbers here, that's Ember with her 3rd ability that does 250% magic damage to all enemies. Again, the chance of the burning is not calculated. So that puts her on 51k damage, but with the burning she will do a bit more depending on your potency, if she can land it. On to number 4, that's Kyra. Her 2nd ability does 240% physical damage to all enemies, and in total it does 51.5k damage. She's another character that will go up in most uses because she will generally, following the turn order, use this ability while invisible and thus giving her 30% more damage. Plus she's often paired with Venomate, which for each stack of poison will increase his damage and Kyra's damage if they are together. But that's another ability that's not taken into account here. On to the big 3. General Murdoch is again on the list, this time with his AoE. 250% physical damage to all enemies and a whooping 55.3k damage in total. On number 2, that's one of the new ones as well, due to her passive that gives her 20% extra magic damage. This boosted her damage a lot. On top of her 230% magic damage to all enemies, this puts her up at 55.8k damage in total to 5 enemies. Just hope they're not goblins, because then they're also slowed, but that's another matter. And the absolute number 1, just as in the other video, is Amara. Her 3rd ability does so much damage, 340%, which puts her up at 71k. So around 15k more damage than the 2nd on this list. And that's even without considering her bonus damage from those targets that are burning or poisoned, because then she gets 60% more. This is a violently ability and absolutely devastates the enemy team. Again, just as with the single targets, we have a special honorary mention, since Talan also takes 1st place in the best AoE ability. She's just not in the game, so I'm not giving her a number, but she does 270% damage to all enemies, and her base damage is ridiculously high. So she does 2k more damage than Amara, with nearly 74k damage in total to the enemy team. There you have it. That concludes my 2 top 10 lists of the most damaging abilities in the game. Hope you enjoyed it. This time the right version. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.